In this lesson, we'll explore a few ways that we could set up some views for our render scene. Alright, so I'd like to welcome you to your first day rendering in AutoCAD. And our goal for this course is basically to take a step-by-step approach to a process of creating a photorealistic rendering in AutoCAD. We'll explore some of our main tools that you'll be using. We'll kind of get familiar with the user interface, and I'll show you a couple of tips along the way that are going to help you, one, save time, but also achieve that look that you're trying to achieve with the scene. So just to kind of get the scope of what we're working with here, I'm going to orbit around here and kind of go into this area. This is going to be our scene here, and right now I have everything set with no materials set to it. There's no lighting or anything, but we have a really basic scene, and we're going to take these elements and create a photorealistic image. So before I begin applying materials and jumping in and rendering and jumping into that whole dance, I like to go ahead and set up my scene, set up my view, and save that view so that I can kind of go back to it and reference it often. So there's a couple of ways that you can actually go about getting your view set. Now, right now we're in a parallel view. If I orbit around, you'll see all the lines here, they're all parallel. Doesn't matter what view I'm looking in. Parallel, parallel, parallel view. And when I go into our scene and I try to get in as close as I can, I want to create a really cool looking perspective, you see that I can achieve somewhat of a perspective, but it's not giving me that look and feel that our true perspective is going to give you. It's almost as if there's no vanishing point. It's just all parallel lines. So to get away from that and to really give myself a nice view, I'm going to go to my view cube and I'm going to right click on that view cube, and you'll see it automatically brings up a window. This window here, parallel, that's exactly what we're in. But watch what happens once I click on perspective. It automatically creates a perspective with a vanishing point, and it totally improves the look and feel of this particular scene. So if you want to create a cool perspective and you're orbiting around your little three-dimensional scene, make sure you right click on that view cube and you set your perspective view. It's going to really help to increase that view just quite a bit. So I like to also orbit around in this area. There's a couple of ways that you can kind of move around and manipulate. If you have a mouse with a wheel on it, simply press that wheel and use your mouse to move around, and you can pan. Really helpful. If you want to orbit around, hold shift, hold your wheel, and you can orbit around to achieve the look and perspective that you want to choose. So these are the tools that I'll be using mostly to get this accomplished. So I can scroll in, I can get in as close as I want. I know what I want to include in here, so I'm simply going to get in as close as I can. And again, I'm going to scroll in and get closer just by using my wheel and toggling in with my wheel. So once I have my view in place, I'm going to type in render. I'm not trying to achieve a final render at this moment, but I just want to make sure that the window that I'm capturing is going to work and it's going to be what I'm trying to achieve. So we can either, at the top here, go to our render tab and simply push our render button, or we could type in render in our command line. Now you'll notice something here. My ribbon looks a little different than what you might see if you were in the drafting and annotation view here. So right now I'm in the 3D modeling. So when I go to this drop down, you'll notice there's drafting and annotation. A lot of times that's what you'll be working in if you're working with two-dimensional drawings, maybe even AutoCAD Classic. But for me to access that ribbon and to have all the tools I need to work with rendering, it's going to be important that you come to this drop down and you switch to 3D modeling, and it will automatically switch this ribbon for you, and you'll see the tabs will update. And what it'll do is it'll give us a render tab, and it'll give us all these tools. So now I can click on my render button, and we'll see if this view is what I wanted. So I could see that I want to kind of tilt this over a little bit and maybe do some more orbiting. So the cool thing about this is, I'm going to move my window so you can get a better view, is once you do render, this window pops up, and it gives you two things. One, it gives you a history. So as you're gradually tuning your dials and working with your image and taking that step-by-step approach to creating that image you want, you'll have your history. So every time you hit that render button, your renders will be here, and then you can compare and contrast what you've done along the way. You can also right-click on those renderings and you can save them and re-render. So you'll see how handy this will come a little bit later as we start tweaking our dials, and you'll see this window fill up with several different renders. So that's one important thing to keep in mind with this little interface here. Secondly, is here to the right is we know all our settings. So anything I set, my render presettings, they're all going to be called out here. So I can reference an image, I can look at an image here, and I know that with this particular image, this was my setting, and if I like what I have, I can right click and I can save it, or I can make that render setting my current settings. So we'll get a little more familiar with that as we work a little further. So let's go ahead and get out of this view. And again, I want to tweak this view up just a little bit. So I'm going to hold down Shift, squeeze my wheel, and I'm going to orbit around just a little bit more. And now I'm going to type in render one more time and see if this gave me the angle that I'm trying to achieve for this room. So yeah, looking good, looking good. It's going to have all the elements. I could probably back out just a bit because I have some lighting here and lighting here that I want to include. So let's do that. Let's do one little small click out. I'll type in render one more time just to take a look at this view, make sure it's including everything I want to. And yes, perfect. So that works for me. So now that we have our scene here set and I'm happy with what I have, it's going to be important that we save it and set it so that we can go back and reference it as we're manipulating and kind of working throughout this scene. So to do that, I'm simply going to go to my Home tab here. And you'll notice here underneath our view area, I can go to this drop down. Right now it's an unsaved view. So if I go to this drop down and I click on View Manager, this is going to allow me to set a view. So I could type in New, and I'm going to name this view. We'll call this one Interior Perspective. We can add all these extra things in here if you wanted to, but I'm not too concerned with that. I'm mainly concerned with saving it and naming it. So I'm going to say OK. You can see right here, we've got a nice little graphic of what that view looks like. It can be very helpful, especially if you have several different views. So I'm going to click Apply to make sure it sticks. I'll say OK. And now you'll see that view here. So let's say we're moving around and we're orbiting around and I need to kind of add some materials throughout. I can now come back to this drop down, click on my interiors perspective, and we'll jump back to that exact same view. So there's no question about how was this view set up before, and I'm not trying to play that game of trying to achieve this view over and over again. It's already set, it's already named, and it's locked in place. So now that we have our view set and we've explored a few ways and a few little tools to help us accomplish that view, in the next lesson, we are going to start playing around with some of our settings for our exterior environment. So I'll meet you in the next lesson.